There are some stories you don't tell out loud, not because they're secrets, but because they're too big. Too quiet. Like thunder that never makes it to the ground. They stay inside you, tucked in the dusty corners of memory, half forgotten and never fully understood. This is one of those stories. It started with a house I didn't want to be in. The summer I turned 27, I inherited my father's house in Vermont. Not a home, not a place of warmth, just a house. Old bones, creaky floorboards, and the kind of silence that wasn't just quiet but watchful. He died alone, just like he lived, and left behind a 2-story farmhouse on the edge of a town I didn't know how to belong to. I hadn't seen him since I was 16. The will didn't come with apologies or explanations. Just a key. A manila envelope with my name in his familiar, reluctant handwriting and a single sentence scrawled on the note inside. Don't sell it until you understand. Understand what, exactly? I took the note, the key, and my emotional debris and drove north from Boston in the middle of a June thunderstorm, the windshield wipers struggling against the downpour. My hands stayed tight on the steering wheel the entire trip, as if letting go even slightly would send me spiraling into something I couldn't claw my way out of. When I pulled up to the house, white siding gone gray, porch sagging, shutters barely hanging on, the rain stopped, just like that. Sky split open like an eye, watching me. I stood at the base of the front steps for a long time, staring up at the place where he'd lived and died and left me behind, again. I had no bags. Just a half-dead phone, a thermos of cold coffee, and a pulse I could hear in my teeth. I almost didn't go in. The girl appeared the second night. I didn't hear her come in. Didn't hear the door open or footsteps on the floorboards. Just looked up from the journal I was scribbling in, notes about the plumbing, old wiring, shit I'd need to fix before I could sell it and be free, and there she was. Sitting on the middle step of the staircase. Maybe 7 or 8 years old. Barefoot. Legs pulled up to her chest. Wearing a white dress with a pattern of tiny blue flowers. She didn't speak. Just watched me with this eerie stillness. Not scared. Not threatening. Just present in a way that made my skin go tight. Like she knew something I didn't, and maybe never would. You okay, kid? I asked, too startled to think properly. Are you lost? No answer. I got up slowly, like approaching a feral animal. Did someone drop you off here? Where are your parents? Still nothing. Her gaze didn't waver. Pale hair, almost translucent. Big eyes, not spooky, not shining, not dead, just knowing. When I reached the foot of the stairs, she said her first words. You shouldn't throw away the things you don't understand. I froze. It was the way she said it, like an echo of something older, like a memory trying to become real. My chest tightened. What did you say? But she was gone. I swear to God, one blink and the space was empty. No footfalls. No creak of steps. Just the hollow quiet of the house and the thump of my own panic. I didn't sleep that night. I walked the halls. Checked every room. Nothing disturbed. No signs of entry. Just an overwhelming sense of being observed. By morning, I convinced myself it was stress. Grief. The weight of stepping back into a past I thought I'd buried under years of therapy and whiskey. Childhood trauma, suppressed memories, the kind of mental splinters you don't notice until they fester. I opened every window. Let the sunlight pour in. The house didn't feel haunted. It felt heavy. Like it was holding its breath. The girl came back on the 4th night. Same spot on the stairs. Same dress. Same silence. Only this time she smiled. Just a little, like she was proud of me. Like she knew I hadn't left yet. That I was beginning to stay. I sat down across the room, not daring to get closer. What's your name? I asked. She tilted her head, considering me. You already know it. No, I started but stopped. My throat tightened. Because something did stir inside me. Not a name, exactly. Not a memory. But a flicker. A whisper of familiarity, like hearing a melody you used to hum in the dark. "You're not real," I said, softer this time. Like saying it out loud might make it true. Her face didn't change. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled something out. A small silver key, dangling from a faded blue ribbon. Then, as if gravity stopped applying to her, she stood and climbed the stairs without a sound, vanishing into the second floor. I didn't follow. Not right away. I stayed rooted to the floor, staring at the place where she'd been. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but something deeper, quieter, whispered, "She's not here to hurt you." That whisper sounded like my mother. But she'd been dead almost 10 years. The second floor had always been off limits when I was a kid. My father's office, his bedroom, locked drawers and closed doors. I remembered the feel of the doorknob in my palm, cold and unmoving, when I was 7, trying to sneak in and see what he kept behind that heavy wooden door. He caught me once and didn't say a word. Just stared. That was always worse than yelling. Now the door was ajar. Inside was dust and papers and the scent of tobacco that clung to the walls like it had soaked into the paint. The desk was covered in books and yellowed maps, journals stacked high and teetering. And there, on the center of the desk, was the key the girl had shown me. I reached out, hand shaking. The key was warm. Tied to the ribbon was a tag, barely legible, but the name was unmistakable. Eleanor. My mother's name. But it wasn't her handwriting. It was mine. I staggered back from the desk like it burned me. No explanation. No logic. Just that growing feeling, sick and sudden and loud in my blood, that the girl on the stairs knew something I'd forgotten, something I'd left behind in this house long ago. And somehow, she was waiting for me to remember. Somewhere, deep inside the walls of that house, a clock was ticking that no one had wound. It wasn't loud, not at first. Just a faint tick-tick-tick, like a memory working its way through bone. But once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. Like it had always been there, waiting for me to come back and notice. The key was still in my hand. Heavy. Real. The ribbon worn thin like it had been handled for years. I couldn't stop staring at my own handwriting on the tag, Eleanor. I hadn't written that. I knew I hadn't. But it was mine. The loops. The little way the E curls at the top. The small crack in the ink at the R. My handwriting aged. As if I'd written it decades ago, except I hadn't even been born when this house first swallowed its secrets. I didn't sleep that night either. The girl didn't come back. But the ticking stayed. The next morning, I went to the town library. I wasn't sure what I was looking for: records, answers, distractions. Anything that could anchor me in something real. The librarian was an older woman named Marnie with a velvet voice and a gaze that read too much, like she already knew which ghosts followed you in. "You're Joseph Holloway's boy, aren't you?" she asked, not unkindly. I hadn't said his name. I hadn't said anything, really. "Yeah," I muttered. "That obvious?" She smiled like someone holding a warm knife. "You've got his frown." I didn't correct her. I wanted to ask her 100 things, what kind of man he was, what she knew, but I didn't have the words. Or the courage. So instead I asked about the house. "Anything strange ever happen out there?" I asked. "Old stories? Rumors?" She looked at me for a long time. Then slowly walked to the back and returned with a thick folder. Local land records. Not quite gossip, but the closest thing to it in paper form. She handed it over. "You'll find your ghosts where you left them, not where they went." It wasn't until I got back to the house that I realized how strange her words were. The key opened a drawer in the upstairs study, an old roll-top desk I remembered being forbidden to touch. Inside I found a pocket watch. It was too pristine. Like it had been polished weekly. Nestled in red velvet, next to a black and white photo of a woman standing on the porch of this house, holding a child I didn't recognize. The inscription on the back of the watch read, "EH for when time forgets us." The initials weren't mine. They weren't my father's. But something in me recoiled from them like they meant something too close to touch. I picked up the photo. The woman in it had my mouth. My eyes. But she wasn't my mother. The child in her arms looked like me. Only younger. Too young. That night I dreamed of clocks. Hundreds of them, all ticking in sync. Filling the house like vines. Crawling up the walls. Wrapping around the girl on the stairs. She looked up at me and whispered, "He told you she died. That was the lie?" I woke up choking on air that wasn't mine. The ticking hadn't stopped. But now it was coming from behind the walls. On the 6th day, I broke open the paneling beneath the staircase. It wasn't out of madness, it was instinct. The girl hadn't returned, but I felt her there. Felt her waiting behind the wood. Watching. Inside, tucked between beams like it had been hidden in a panic, was a box. Not dusty. Not forgotten. Protected. It was a child's box. Painted blue, with small, careful flowers scrawled along the sides. Inside were drawings. Crude, but familiar. A stick-figure girl with long pale hair. A staircase. A tall man with no face. Always watching. And then there was a journal. Bound in cracked leather. Inside, in looping child's handwriting. "My name is Eleanor. I remember everything." I sat there on the floor for hours. Reading. Flipping pages slowly like they'd bite. Some entries were written with rage, torn ink, furious slants. Others were calm. Terrified. Almost prophetic. "Daddy says I can't leave the stairs. She said I used to be real. He said I was never born, but I remember birthdays. I was his mistake and his prayer. I think I was supposed to die, but I didn't. She hums to me at night when he drinks." That last line made my vision go dark at the edges. My father was never a drunk, not openly. But there had always been shadows in him. Conversations he avoided. Questions that drew silence like blood. Eleanor. The name on the tag. The name on the journal. The name of the girl who sat on the stairs. I drove to the cemetery that night. The one behind the old chapel on the hill. My father was buried there, alone, by his request. There was no headstone for my mother. She was cremated. I spread her ashes at the coast. But there was another grave. Small. Tucked in the far corner. Eleanor Grace Holloway. Born and died, May 17, 1996. Brief as a breath, but loved as forever. That date. It was a year before I left. A year before my mother started locking herself in the bedroom and whispering things I couldn't hear. Before the silence between us turned permanent. But I was born in '93. And I never had a sister. I sat there in the dirt until morning. And for the first time since I came back to this house, I cried. Not like an adult. Not clean, not controlled. I cried like the boy I used to be, when the stairs were off limits, and the quiet was dangerous, and my father's eyes made me feel erased. Eleanor. She wasn't a ghost. She was real. And my father had buried her, and the truth, before I ever learned her name. When I returned to the house, she was waiting. Same spot on the stairs. Knees pulled to her chest. Pale hair around her shoulders like a veil. I stood in the doorway, hollowed out. "I saw your grave," I whispered. She didn't speak. "I don't understand," I said. "You weren't supposed to exist. I would have remembered." She smiled. "Not if he took it from you," she said. "He didn't want you to carry it. So he buried it in both of us." I sank to the floor. "What are you?" I asked. Her eyes softened. And this time, she moved toward me. Just a little. Just enough. "I'm the girl who sat on the stairs," she said gently. "And I was waiting for you to come back and remember who I was." I opened my mouth to speak, but something cracked in the house. A loud groan, like time tearing open. And then, just before the lights flickered and the air turned cold, she whispered, "He didn't just lie about me. He lied about you too." Some memories don't fade, they hide. They lie dormant, like embers buried beneath ash, waiting for the right breath to wake them up. That's what this house was. That's what she was. Not a haunting. A remembering. And now that I'd found Eleanor, I couldn't unremember her. The next morning, I found a door I didn't know existed. It was behind a bookshelf in my father's office. The wall had warped slightly from years of moisture and time, and something about the way the ticking echoed made me run my hand along the paneling. A thin seam. A loose board. When I tugged, the shelf tilted forward with a reluctant creak, revealing a narrow wooden door, no taller than a crawlspace, with a rusted handle that stung my fingers when I touched it. It hadn't been opened in years. Decades, maybe? Inside was a small room. Not quite a closet, not quite a secret. Just space. Old toys. A child's chair. A broken mobile hanging from the ceiling by threadbare string. And in the far corner, a stack of papers scorched at the edges, held together with a rotted leather strap. I lifted the bundle carefully. Most of the pages were blackened, but I could still make out fragments. Letters. Names. Reports. Some were medical. Some weren't. Subject appears to exhibit signs of persistent identity duality. Responds to name Eleanor when under emotional stress. Mother expressed concern over child's nighttime episodes. Claims child sings in her sleep in someone else's voice. Recommended inpatient psychiatric evaluation. Father refused. June 3, 1999. House fire reported in Holloway residence. Contained to nursery wing. Declared accidental. No formal death certificate issued. Case closed by request of Joseph Holloway. That last part stopped me cold. No death certificate. Just a grave. A headstone with no paper trail. A body that might have never been there. The girl appeared again that night. She sat in the same place, middle stair, barefoot, dressed like frost, and for the first time, she looked tired. Not sad. Not afraid. Just tired. I sat at the bottom of the stairs, the burned bundle in my lap. He tried to erase you. She didn't nod. She didn't have to. He told the world you never lived. I said. Told me you didn't. But you were here. You're still here. She looked down at her hands. That's why I stayed. Someone had to remember. My voice cracked. Why me? You were the only one who knew how to forget. After she disappeared, no flash, no smoke, just gone, I walked back to the study. The ticking had changed tempo. Slower. More deliberate. Almost guiding. I placed the pocket watch on the desk again. It began to tick louder. I opened it. The face of the watch had cracked slightly since I first touched it. A single fracture down the center like a split in time. Beneath the crack, faint, almost invisible, were the initials. JH and EH. Not just hers. Mine too. When I was a kid, my father used to whisper prayers at night, not to God, but to time. I never understood it. Just quiet murmurs through the wall. Give me more time. Let me keep this one. I always thought he was talking about my mother. But maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was talking about me. Or someone else who looked like me. In the attic, beneath a tarp, I found an old trunk. Inside, VHS tapes. Dozens. All labeled in my father's handwriting. Years. Dates. Some familiar. Some long before I was born. One was labeled EH, 1996. I stared at it for a long time before sliding it into the dusty old player in the living room. The screen crackled. Static. Then, a home video. A nursery. Pale blue walls. Laughter. A baby girl, about 10 months old, crawling on the floor. She turns to the camera. Blonde hair. Big eyes. Her name, called gently by a woman off-screen. Eleanor, come here, sweet pea. And the baby laughs. My laugh. My voice. I staggered back like the floor had vanished. It wasn't déjà vu. It wasn't recognition. It was possession. The feeling of something slipping into place like it had always been there, waiting. The girl on the stairs was not my sister. She was not my unborn daughter. She was me. The part of me that wasn't supposed to survive. I had been Eleanor. And then I was someone else.